And let's move on then to this conversation. It's Women's Month, and while issues of economic emancipation of women still tops the agenda in South Africa, the issues of access to education for black women in particular is just as critical. Now, while the numbers show that more young women are graduating, but the numbers aren't translating to them occupying senior positions in academia. So how do we improve this particular situation? Let's speak to Babalwa Ngonyama from Sinayo Securities, who's the CEO there, as well as a UCT chair of council. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It's one of those issues that we continuously talk about. There's an improvement when it comes to access to education when you think of what was happening pre-1994. But we're seeing more black women still not occupying senior positions when it comes to the world of academia. In your view, what exactly is causing this? Is it because the system is against them, or is there no willingness when it comes to support?
Sure. Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. The challenge starts from the primary school. You are aware that out of 100 kids who start primary today, only 4 will graduate at the end of the day. And out of that 4, if you are lucky, you'll have 2 women, if you are lucky. So that's the reality now. It makes it very, very difficult and hard for us to build a strong cohort of women. However, we can't give up. Unfortunately, we do not have the luxury to give up. So what we are doing, if I may start with UCT ourselves, we make sure that we support the student and we look at the potential. So already we are having a very strong cohort of students who are finishing, and some of them have already finished their doctorate to date. So the empowering of women requires that deliberate intervention, you know. And number 2, we need more role models. You know, one thing that we tend to underestimate is once you put a woman there, people relate to her. And once they relate to her, they begin to believe that this is for me as well. The fact that I'm the chair of council, most young women believe that they can be as well. So it's very important. So what we have done at UCT, we have diversified our leadership. Out of 6 deans that we have, 3 are women. You know, black women. And then out of the deputy vice chancellors, they are all women. And we have a vice chancellor who's a woman at UCT. We have a chancellor who's a woman. In my council, out of the 6 committees that we have, 4 are women, you know. So we just need to be deliberate about these things.
And talking about being deliberate, it's also important because when you think about these historically white, you know, institutions, you think of the fact that sometimes you would see a group, almost like a clique of white men that would be guarding that. So if you are deliberate, you also try to break down some of these barriers for these young women you are talking about to ensure that they also form part of the system.
You are right, because the challenge is that culture. That's what you need to correct. And how do you correct then the culture? In a university, the apex structure is the Senate of the university, which then reports to council. But from an education point of view, it is that structure that makes recommendations to council. That's where you find your white professor sitting. So you do need to ensure then that at that level, you change also the mindset. I would say that if we can change the mindset of men about women or their attitude towards women, we can go a long way in academia, in business, and in the country in general. They are leading the strategy of the organization, sit firmly with them. So at UCT, we are seeing more and more of the white professors being conscious now of the fact that we do need black women, we do need women in general, and as a result of that buy-in within the university, we are making progress.
It's also, as you talk about the buy-in, the other critical aspect, I'm not sure if you'll agree with this one, may then need to also be exercised within the families and society itself, because that's where sometimes these black women are not getting enough support to be able to get into some of these spaces, given how marginalized in some communities they still are, and they come from these communities as well.
Yeah, and remember, when you are a black woman, you are marginalized in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of class, in many ways. So in your own community, first and foremost, the level of disrespect that we go through and being undermined, it's unbelievable. And then it escalates to universities themselves and to business. So I think what we do need to do, both as men and women, we should not tolerate these bad behaviors and these nasty comments about women. We need to change the culture at that level. We should believe in our women. We should support them. We should support their progress. We should actually make noise and shout when a man is disrespecting a woman. We should say no quite clearly to that.
And that is important, because you also talk about, the deliberate approach that needs to be put in there. But, there's often sometimes these conversations that take place, especially, when you think of black women and how they need to be occupying these spaces. One will say they also need to make sure that they are moving the needle. But the onus cannot be only on them to change the status quo. It needs to be everyone else involved, so that they don't feel the burden of also trying to break down some of these doors to be able to get access to, some of the senior positions in academia.
Sure. I would say, though, it's two-way. It's a dance, this thing. It's a dance, because if you're given an opportunity and you don't want it and it doesn't work for you, no one can push you that hard. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, men are still the leaders in our society. So if the leaders are conscious of supporting women, they create, therefore, an environment which is conducive for women, it does make our life very, very easy. So that's step number one. That mindset for me is quite critical. The second step, though, is for women now to believe in themselves. Sometimes you find yourself alone, because it is very difficult in a masculine environment, and you begin to doubt yourself. You're not sure. And I want to say to women, you've earned it. Many people have fought for you to be there. Always remember that. And there is a quote that says, you come as one, and you bring 10,000 women, So that quote for me in itself, it reminds me every time I'm in a boardroom that actually there are 10,000 women who I'm representing here today. I'm not alone. And therefore, I must push forward and make sure I believe. The last thing around believing in yourself, if you have a purpose, you do something that is you are passionate about, that you like, in a very deliberate, focused and purposeful way, you stand a much better chance of doing a great job in representing your society in general.
I'd like to add another partner to this particular dance, as you talk about it, the men and the conversations that they need to be having, because if they also have this responsibility to ensure that transformation is a reality, particularly in the academic space, what kind of deliberate conversations must they be having around these boardroom tables?
Sure. Firstly, in academia, we have a responsibility as leaders to check who sets the agenda. Who sets that agenda? What is in that agenda? What is being discussed in that meeting? Who is speaking? Because one of the challenges that you find is that when a woman is speaking, she's not even allowed to finish a sentence. You know, a man jumps in. You know, those are the things we must be very deliberate about. Who is speaking? When is she speaking? About what? You see, so that agenda setting in boardroom becomes extremely, extremely important. What you will also do then is when you put women in strategic positions, so they drive the direction, they carry the authority, they carry the power, which matters, especially in the academic space. You need that. So it's been very important and deliberate for us at UCT when we said we're going to look for potential, we're going to look for competency, and therefore we put people at the right place, and it's working.
Babalwa, time is always the enemy, and this is such an important conversation. I wish, you know, another time we have more of it to delve into some of the legislation as we look at, you know, sometimes the black women are not placed on par when it comes to some of their white counterparts. But let's leave it there for now, and do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming in. That is Babalwa Ngonyama, Sinayo Securities CEO and UCT Chair of Councillors. We talk about the need for more black women to get into the space of academia.